Through personal stories, mindfulness practices, science, psychology, and wisdom traditions, these conversations are an invitation to slow down, listen deeply, and remember that we are never separate. We invite you to grow with us on this journey together through rekindling our connection with nature. Welcome to the Bonded Podcast. On today's episode, we reconnect with Dr. Lindsay Branham, author of Heartwood, environmental psychologist, Emmy-nominated filmmaker, and eco-doula. We first met Lindsay at her retreat at Esalen in Big Sur, and it profoundly changed the way I relate with and view nature. Today, we get to share some of the nutrient-dense wisdom from her studies and book by exploring erotic ecology, composting grief, belonging, and what the trees have to teach us about healing. Welcome, Lindsay, to the Bonded Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, we are so honored and excited to have you on as we just wrapped up our book study on Heartwood and are, just like there's so much inspiration and wisdom in this book. And we want to inspire others that weren't in the book study to read the book and to begin these more eco-mindfulness practices and connecting with nature and our bodies. But curious, what really inspired you to write the book, or like what was happening in your life? If you want to share more of that personal side to your story on, how this book came to life.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. And it's just so sweet given how I met you both at Esalen almost 2 years ago. So it's also just inspiring for me to see what you both are building together and weaving in the world. So, 6 years ago, COVID had started, and we all remember how the world stopped, right? And everything slowed down. I had been a war journalist, war photographer in Central Africa for about 15 years on and off, but in conflict areas really around the world and humanitarian disasters, and spending a lot of time with people in very, very difficult circumstances and really investigating, exploring kind of different modalities, creative modalities to bring healing and cohesion. And then when 2020 hit, I went to New Mexico. My family had a lot of history there, and there were teachers of mine that lived there, and something about the land kind of called me. But I wouldn't have really put it like that then, probably. I just kind of felt drawn and had an intuition. But anyone that has had chronic pain or sickness knows just how loud pain is. And in a moment when the whole world was still, and then all of a sudden my whole body felt like it was kind of decomposing underneath me, and I started getting all these really confusing symptoms. I didn't have COVID, so it wasn't related to that. It just happened to happen at the same time, and that sparked a several-year parallel journey of my chronic health illness, and at the same time maybe an eco-awakening and love affair with nature. And those they started together, and then they continue to grow together. And a few years into that, so much changed for me because of my relationship with nature, my kinship with the earth, that I really wanted to put that together into a book. And I actually had a childhood dream to write a book, so it felt connected to something that I'd always really wanted to do.
The way that you speak so personally and your vocabulary and language, it is very unique. I haven't read any book like that so poetically, and it really brings to life what it's like to be in that relationship with nature and to be in the body. So that was always something that was wow, each chapter we're oh, this is so potent and alive. You create that aliveness in your words and your writing. So
I'm glad that you feel that way. There's so many ways you can write. And I had just come out of my PhD program, which is a very different kind of writing, and actually wrestled a lot with how do I go kind of as far away from that as possible so that when you read the book, you actually can feel what I was feeling and not be at this, like, 10,000 miles away, like telling someone a bunch of frameworks or information. So I'm really glad that came through, because it was it was hard for me because I was like really kind of indoctrinated into a more like academic kind of writing.
I also loved and appreciated that you wrote in that way, but also you were able to really bring in science and history and so much knowledge that I don't know, it felt like I was reading like 3 books in one,
Yeah.
So science meets spirituality, and it felt like I want to take it on vacation with me so I can savor it a little more, because we were reading for book study.
Yeah.
Right. So I had that intention in some way. And I feel like I want to take it with me. Well, I did take it to Costa Rica. I did actually enjoy, and I will say that it's a book that really can be savored and reread over and over. And I think those practices, I had this vision of me kind of like tearing them out and putting my little book of practices together so I could take them with me into nature. So maybe I'll do that too.
I love that. Well, I should really make a workbook, another, for just the practices and a little bit around it, but
I love that idea. Okay.
book 2, it's like already there.
Exactly. So an important perspective shift that you said right in the intro is your language around using they them for earth and like for nature elements and creatures, and refraining from using the term Mother Earth. And I'd love for you to share why you chose this and for new listeners.
Yeah. So it's really rooted in the wisdom of indigenous scholars who use the term, specifically Robin Wall Kimmerer talks about the importance of grammars of animacy. So language of aliveness. And in Braiding Sweetgrass, she says she doesn't ever use it to refer to nature and their creatures and many lives, because it's an object, right? And it is like an immediate like deadening of a object with like no soul in there. And that choice, I think I came across during my Buddhist eco-chaplaincy program, and I just was like, obviously that makes so much sense, but just like how much language informs our relationship. And by giving that, it's not just a passive thing. It actually comes through the body and informs the way we see and interact. And so know it, for one, that was like layer 1. And then for me, I added on that extra layer of not genderizing the earth. And I think that was really formed by my Buddhist eco-chaplaincy program, where we really sat with these questions around accessibility and equity and how to just be so intentional. And there was a really special friend in that program who's gender nonconforming, and it really was inspired actually from them and how they felt like it limited their access to nature when people just kept saying like, this is he or she or whatever, because where are they in that then? Yeah. So that was one layer, but I also nature is not singular either. So then there's also this layer of like, well, it's they're polymorphous. So a tree is not even a singular being after all, and neither are we, really. We have millions of bacteria in our gut, so it kind of creates like a playfulness as well, and a real imagination and possibility.
It's expansive, which nature is, and so and then bringing it more alive has a whole different perspective in how we show up and interact and feel.
Yeah.
Nature.
Yeah.
we just finished book study on Monday, and reading the chapter called Queer Ecology, and just how much our book study group really appreciated everything written about in there, and it expanded already, some of my thinking. It's sometimes hard when you're in the world, interacting with people with a very, very limited kind of view. And of course, I also can say I also still have a very limited view. Okay. And this book helps in a very cool way, because this was really our intention of having your book be a part of our series on nature being this first of all, this way of deepening our experience of life itself, of understanding our retreat with you, which was really beginning to see these different relationships that we have with nature. That was like a really cool experience of, again, expanding awareness, opportunity to grow, and to see things you really haven't seen before. And I feel like your book did that. And this chapter is really special to me because I am a psychologist working healing trauma. And so some of the trauma of people being othered around their sexuality and that sense of and how important a sense of belonging is in terms of our health and wellness, physical, mental, emotional, relational. And that, I already know this is like people just don't get it. And it's so frustrating. And I actually think that this could be like so expanded on in using nature as a lens to help people really see into not only are there differences and that they are natural, okay, that there is strength in differentiation and these differences. So I just wanted to give a huge shout out. It's like the most recent in my mind because we just finished that chapter. And perhaps it might be book 3 for you.
Well, I love hearing that. And something that comes up so much is just that sense of safety and belonging. And I was at Esalen last week leading a retreat, 5-day version. It was so juicy. But there was a couple of people that had quite a bit of sexual trauma. And this piece of learning to find safety and belonging with nature is so powerful because nature is not going to, cross those boundaries of consent or violate. And so there was this really special opening for people around becoming in touch with their bodies in a way that was kind of opening up reconnections to even pleasure, but through such a safe lens. Someone was holding a rock and felt like this rock was teaching them all about boundaries and holding and safety and clarity. They had been through quite a bit. So I think, you're right. It's like endless what is possible with nature, which is the point. It's like, this is an infinite. This is our medicine cabinet. It's all around us and within us because we're also nature.
Ooh, yeah. There's the whole idea of building a secure relationship with nature is something that we're really excited to explore more on this series and in this podcast. And you really were the first person to fully introduce that to us and like think about it in that way. And you share like how we're wounded in relationships, but we also can heal in relationships. And that's everything that the Bonded podcast is about. And so curious how, you might share with listeners who have never heard of this idea before, haven't read the book, like how we begin to include Earth as a relational partner, as our kin, how maybe this relationship became healing or supportive for you? And then I know, you propose these questions on, like, what does the earth want from us too? Like, it's not just us healing over here, but what does the earth want from us?
Yeah, in a reciprocal way. Well, I think most people are probably familiar with attachment theory or have heard of it since, as you know, it's become like so popularized in like an Instagrammy way, right? Of like diagnosing which attachment style you are, which I think is like, it's good that it's in like the lexicon, but it's also a little problematic just because, right, it like pins people in a category. And I think one, so important just to remember, just anyone can change and come along that spectrum towards safety at any point. I mean, towards security. And that's open and available to all beings. And our connection to in relationship is like so predictive, right? Of health and well-being and happiness across the lifespan. And decades of research have shown that. And that really kind of boils down to this idea of secure attachment with a primary caregiver. So what if that primary caregiver or this safe harbor or anchor or refuge could be nature? And a lot of folks didn't have that in a human being for a lot of reasons. And it's never too late to rediscover what that feels like in our bodies and our nervous systems. Attachment is very much a nervous system framework. And so the ability to feel good in closeness and feel okay in distance, right? So in my relationship with nature, I think the very first time I was like, wait, what's happening here? I had developed this deep connection to a stand of 3 aspen trees in the Roaring Fork Valley of Colorado. And I love to just say that they weren't like the fanciest or the most gorgeous. They were just the ones that like called me. I'm obsessed with them, but they're just these like 3 gracious trees on the side of a hill. And I was going to visit them one day. And now I think this has been like a year into our relationship. And as I was walking towards them, I just had this feeling of like, oh gosh, do they love other people? Like, am I the only one? I want to be special. And like, if I leave and go back to LA, are they going to miss me? How am I going to feel? I feel anxious already just thinking about being away from them. And then it just was so clear to me. I'm like, these are the types of things I think about with like a caregiver or like a primary attachment. I'm having the same types of like feelings around like being apart and like concern about like, am I special to them? And I was like, wow, how fascinating. I think I'm forming an attachment, like a deep attachment here, and how precious. And then I brought that question to the trees, that concern, like, will you love me if I'm away? And am I the only one? And all of my kind of fears around it. And I just felt like all of that kind of melt as I tuned into my belonging to the whole forest. It just didn't matter. It was like, no, I belong here. And like, of course they get to love everyone else. And like, I love that. And there's enough for everyone. There's enough love for all. And so I then took that idea and put that into my PhD research and did some study around, is secure attachment, does that map onto relationship with nature? And in my survey study found that it does, and predicts, this is obvious, but then predicts your sense of closeness to nature and then your desire to protect nature. So that reciprocal piece. Yeah. And we know that, that the closer we feel to nature, the deeper that relationship is, and then the benefits come. But I think the difference between, the conversation of just like nature benefits humans to what we're talking about, which is this kinship and relationship and reciprocal bond, is that relationship piece. And that is very much an indigenous idea, and indigenous knowledge systems, that's central. It's all about concentricity. So the relationship between all relations, which include trees, animals, stones, river, wider nature. And so that is really important as a way to look at this, really through that lens of relationship. So you could form the type of bond that your soul has always really longed for, and the type of connection and being seen and being witnessed even, which is another way to flip it. Instead of just me seeing nature, what if I allow myself to be seen and to be witnessed? That satisfies something so deep of like that need. We all have that need to feel, fully accepted just as we are, that unconditional love. And that's what they have to offer.
We always talk about the foundations of that secure attachment as being safe, seen, and soothed, and how really nature really offers us that every day.
Yeah.
Every day, they are there, all of them, ready and willing and waiting to witness us. And it just made me, thanks for sharing that story really of your connection with those trees and like that process that you went through of recognizing that you were growing attached. And then there was that insecure moment of, well, am I the only one? And how, in fact, as you moved through to really feeling secure attachment, and I'll even call it love, a sense of love arose inside of you.
Yeah.
You know, that felt sense of being loved and loving, that energy of love, and how when we are experiencing that, when we know that in our body, we know that is infinite, that sense of needing to be the only one disappears.
Yeah. It's so profound. Like what we're talking about, as you know, it's like the foundation of what causes so much pain and suffering and violence, actually, right? I mean,
yeah, I even think like, you know, I'm sure you've read and learned all about like forest bathing and as a mindfulness teacher, and Lizzie and I do a lot of eco-mindfulness, so practicing mindfulness in nature, and how, you know, how really those experiences are really deep. Like they're not just like I'm breathing in this fresh air, okay? That it goes way beyond that. And, you know, that's sort of just an expansion in my own as a certified MBSR teacher. This year I took up training in eco-awareness through the Best Foundation, who's training MBSR teachers to bring in nature as a part of the training and teaching in MBSR.
that's great.
Yeah, because already the power of presence, of being awake and aware, and then bringing that out into nature, or bringing nature in even into that experience, into your sense of being connected. How I feel like that's just not only rich in healing, which is one of our primary work, let's say, that we do as therapists, psychologists. That's what we're doing, you know, in our offices and out in the world every day. But we know, and this is, I'll hand it off to Lizzie, her real belief about when we heal ourselves, okay, when we feel safe and secure, how that really impacts other people around us, but also nature and the earth.
And you really use the body as the gateway to all of this. And the body can be also a really challenging place for people to start too. So I'd love for you to speak to, you know, how you kind of discovered the body as like, oh, this is the language of nature, and like how you might guide someone or support someone to like begin that process of connection.
Yeah. So I think probably the body was my starting point because of my sickness. So that was my portal into this deep way of relating to myself and to nature. It was just so obvious that there was no way around the body. And I'm so grateful, even though it was hellish, and I would never wish that on anyone. And yet I do look at it as a gift now, because I wouldn't be who I am without that, or where I am. I wouldn't be having this conversation with you. This book would not exist, so it's like, it's all within some complex, mysterious web, right? So that's number one. But as I started doing my PhD research, and I started by interviewing Black, Indigenous, people of color, environmental activists about their relationship to nature, it was just clear to me, okay, climate change knowledge is everywhere. We know the planet is in trouble, and yet it's really hard to take action. There's this big gap and this big sense of paralysis and confusion. And so I wanted to interview people that were doing this actively in their lives and see, like, filter back, like, is there a relationship that they have with nature that's like driving that? And like, if so, what is that relationship? And I did this very long, slow research process called qualitative phenomenological analysis, which basically means you're like drenched in the phenomenon of what these interviews for like a year. It's a very slow, I only did 8 interviews and took a year with them. There's like 9 different steps you have to follow to sit with each interview. So,
wow.
But through that, it was almost like being a theologian or something and studying a sacred text. That's how I treated these interviews. And like, instead of top down imposing my theory on the interview, it was really about like, what is the wisdom of these words and letting them come through. It was really beautiful. But 4 domains really rose to the surface. And the first was the body. And then the second was intimacy, secure attachment. Third, cosmology, or worldview, basically. And then 4th, justice, this sense of there is no separating, right, Earth relationship from justice. But so the body, and they use language, like very sensory language, to talk about how they connected to nature. And it was just so obvious. I'm like, oh, there is a language of sensation here. And that is how we're communicating with nature. And then with my scientist hat on, then I was like, okay, is there any kind of like framework that maps onto this in the psychology literature? And I came across interoception, which is our 8th sense and is our ability to sense our bodily signals from the inside. So super subtle. It's just this very sensory level. It's not, our main 5. And then we have our 6th, which is proprioception, where we are in space. 7th, vestibular, our sense of balance. And 8 is interoception. And the research on this is just super amazing, because it shows that how attuned we are to this very subtle sensory level predicts our emotional regulation capacity, emotional literacy. And my research looked at it also predicts our ability to connect to nature. So that way, I'm like, okay, so I have my experience, I have this qualitative research, and now I have this like quantitative research that says the same thing, that basically the body is our landscape of sensation and our language with nature. So then I love talking in the frame of like, we can speak the language of the earth, and it's the language of the body, because when you're standing in front of that tree and you have this like buzzy feeling in the heart, or you said this sense of love energy. What is that? That's usually like some kind of warmth or some kind of like pervasive, juicy, yummy honey feeling or something. That's sensation. That is our language. So that's how a tree is talking to us, through our own bodies. So if we aren't in our bodies, if we're not attuned to the body, then we miss out on the entire conversation.
Yeah, and really that that pleasure too, and joy as well, that can be felt in that relationship, which you also name grief can happen in those relationships as well. But I'd love first to explore this term erotic ecology, because it's such like a fun, ooh, what's that mean? And I really just loved the shift in perspective of, not only are we attracted to a flower, but perhaps that flower is actually calling in us and seducing us. And I love that perspective. So feel free to share.
Yeah, well, I love that you love it. And I'm finding everyone loves it too. I mean, for obvious, it's like such a juicy term, right? But I think it speaks to, one, just the fact that there's so much deadening of the senses through the overculture and this sense of disembodiment and even like a lack of trust of the body. And then with the overlay of technology and news, I mean, we all know this. It's very hard. It's either like we're desensitized and we're oversensitized at the same time. And so the cost of that is actually a cutoff then from our own aliveness, because if we can't feel, then we also can't feel all the good things. And so we're missing out on that. And like, what a better teacher of aliveness and vitality than the source of that, which is nature all around us. And I think that flip of, well, looking at erotic ecology as like a life path, it's like a devotional. I think of it as like a devotion to being in service of life and vitality for all. And so in that, it's like more Buddhist of like the end of suffering for all beings, but just like life for all beings, and wellness and goodness for all beings. But I think I just really started to sense in my own journey, just like, oh, wow, like I am being drawn. I am being pulled in here. There's like a gravity to like what's happening. I'm just like, I can't help it. And then it's like, oh, this is like a lovership or like a love affair. And then that opens up all this like playful realm of letting oneself like be in the mystery and the beauty and the unfolding, and to be like so fully saturated by that, I think begins to change people from the inside for sure. And we did this practice at Esalen last week where, I mean, you remember the garden at Esalen, it's just so vibrant and luscious. And then we had people allow themselves to be attracted somewhere in the garden and then go and just really drench in that, and then bring someone to that place and show them your attraction with no words, and like see if you can help them get turned on and, you know, by that flower, by that whatever cliffside, but just through like expression and invitation. And people just had so much fun with that. Because like our joy grows, right, when we see others' joy. And it really is that Buddhist idea of mudita, empathic joy, and like your joy is my joy. So when yours expands, mine grows. And to get to feel that is so satisfying. It's like the way we're supposed to be in relationship and with nature.
Yeah. Really just that spreading of joy feels like more of my path. Of like being more of a light and bringing people to recognize the beauty and light of this world. And it's bringing me more to this question that a lot of our, you know, at the end of each book study, they'd be like, okay, like, what do we do? And, you know, they have this eco-anxiety and the eco-grief that you name, and even some hopelessness. But this really speaks to, or it brings up for me, how us engaging in our joy, and then we can share that, and that can have a ripple effect. And I'd love to hear more from you on, our students, our listeners, as they awaken to the reality of what is happening on Earth and the anxieties and pain that they feel now once they are in relationship. What can they do? I mean, you offer a bunch of things in there, but
I mean, I reference Joanna Macy so much in the book because she's a great teacher of mine and really such an elder in this deep ecology space. And she ascended to the other realms last summer at, I think, 94 years old. So just a very long, devoted life in service and devotion to environmental activism. But she was so playful and so vibrant and so vital. If you ever got to spend time with her, see her, I mean, she was like this mischievous, like just like endlessly exploring. So I love that example because here's somebody who spent her whole life looking at the reality with sober heart, bringing people through grief practices. That was the cornerstone of her work. And yet she was like full of play, full of love, full of light, right? Because that's what happens when we move through grief. It gets to be alchemized and composted. And grief is always pointing us to what we love. And so that, cultural tendency to avoid grief because it's hard or feels difficult. Of course, it is hard and it is difficult, but there is a promise. It doesn't stay that way. It alchemizes. And so encouraging people to do that work, but in community. I think we need these collective rituals and these opportunities to feel what someone else's heart is mourning. And in that, it gets shared, right? And in that, the burden gets lessened. And then creative ideas can come through. I think we've gotten to a place where it's like, okay, well, this is where human, the best of human brilliance has gotten us, which I'm not diminishing all the progress. And at the same time, that's come at a great cost to the planet. And so I think it's time to really listen to what the planet's wisdom might be about how to be together and how to create a place where we can mutually flourish and thrive. And so what if those ideas could come from nature, actually, in collaboration with humans? And that doesn't happen unless we're willing to look with a really clear, in Buddhism, we talk about right seeing, which leads to right action. And compassion as a path. I mean, gosh, it's just so beautiful to live your life like that. And it does mean the heart is touched by all that we cannot save and all that we will lose. And yet we're living because we're feeling and our hearts are alive. And I would much rather live with an alive heart that feels than one that's protected and cut off and doesn't actually get to feel the full experience of being here.
Yeah, and I remember you in the chapter on composting grief, you pose a question on how grief can be a nutrient. And like compost, we compost it and then it can birth. And like you're saying, through this community processing and relationship, these ideas could be birthed from that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't even know what that would look like.
Right.
I mean, I'm just like, we have no idea what's going on, really. Trees are communicating with each other underground and they're sharing. And like scientists thought that trees were competitors up until like a decade ago. And now we know through the work of forest scientist Suzanne Simard, that they're sharing, they're collaborating, they're warning each other of danger. Like the whole world is conspiring for each other.
Yeah.
Like that's the world we have. And like, I want to be a part of that, not the one where I'm like trying to hoard and, only make a life that works for me. Like that just makes no sense. Like when you look at our interconnection and entanglement, it's like, there's no king of the forest. It's a we. And like, we are a we.
Yeah, it makes me think of, I'm in this other book study that just finished as well. And it's called Human Nature. And my experience in reading it with this book study group is this idea that, number one, I learned so much valuable information to continue to grow even my own understanding of our interconnection. And we talk a lot about the poly crisis, and it makes sense. Like people talk about the climate crisis and the social political crisis, but really it's all interconnected. Okay, you can't actually even separate that if you really look with clear eyes. I even think of how the abuse of people, of animals, of the earth and our resources, and like you just pointed to, there being a king, sort of like a ruler, a controller, and that's not the way we're meant to live, right? We are really, and maybe the three of us and our cohort and people understand that it's through cooperation that is truly how nature works.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And we need to get in alignment with that.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Well, I know I shared your experience at Esalen with so many people. Lizzie and I have shared it in many, many ways, because I do really think that going and having an experience. The book is amazing. Heartwood, please read. And I think if people get a chance to be with you, to be guided through these experiences, even, I feel blessed. Thank you so much. And I would like to honor Lizzie, because I really do believe she is the person who inspired me, led me, invited me to experience not just your workshop, but nature, to be more connected. Because I was disconnected, which you'll have to listen to a previous podcast of how all that disconnection happened.
Yeah.
Some of it is just like our culture and life, but some of it is also kind of trauma related. And I feel really blessed to be reintroduced and begin to feel safe in nature again. Thanks to both of you.
Yes. Oh, so sweet. I love the mother-daughter bond. So beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I'll do a quick wrap up with one question of how you've seen the book really impact the world or communities, or how it's rippling out into the ecosystems.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So I'm on a book tour. I have like 30 stops over from March until really like October. And some of them are retreats and immersions, and some of them are just book talks at bookstores. But I think what I've seen over and over, I mean, one, when you write a book, you put it out into the world. I was terrified. I was like, actually, never mind, forget it. Like before the first book event, I was like, maybe just nobody's going to come, and like no one, will receive this. And like, maybe I just don't even want to do this book tour. But I've just been so blown away with the people that have come and feel this connection at some level to trees. I've had people like come and gift me like a little tree sprig, or tell me about their, lineage with trees, or I've just had such really special, intimate encounters with people now in England and all over the US. It's given me a lot of nourishment, which I guess it makes sense. It's like the forest. It's like me and the forest have been like alone in this incubator, super intimate space. And now the whole forest is like loving me back through it, is how it feels actually. And I'm getting to just see and feel into the mycelial network of all these beautiful souls who are like resonant with this at some level. And it just feels so precious and hope inducing for me, because it's easy to feel like you're alone. And I felt like that. I'm like literally by myself out here with the trees. Like, okay, are people going to think I'm just like a crazy tree lady?
Yeah.
But there's actually like a lot of tree lovers out there. Yeah. and people just hungry to feel seen in their path of reconnecting to nature too. So it's been very precious.
Wonderful. Well, we will continue to share it and awaken more tree lovers in our community.
Great. And yes, please, if you do read it, I would love people to review it, because it helps other people find it. Yeah. And you can follow me on Instagram at Lindsay Loren. And I actually am just starting an institute out of the book. We're just forming it. It's called the Heartwood Institute. Ooh. And all devoted to restoring kinship between humans and nature. So check that out.
Wonderful. Well, yeah, I'll link all the things in the show notes so people can stay connected, buy the book, review the book, and continue to grow together.
Thank you both so much.
Oh, thank you for your contribution to the world and to nature, and being a really, really, really bright light.
Oh, you. Likewise. So much tree love.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. If it spoke to you, it'll probably speak to someone you love too. Share it with a friend and leave us a 5-star review to help spread the message it's never too late to heal.